I have to be completely honest. My husband and we had a fight last night. Actually, it's kind of lingered, and the culmination was yesterday. And it takes me a while to get over things, even after we've worked it out. But I woke up this morning and, I just felt just like I don't even know who I am anymore. And, I used to be really bad with the fighting, just regular husband and wife things, right? Um, and guess what? I'm still pretty bad. Like I it's just regular bickering, but it comes down to this, when your husband wants to do something one way and you see things differently and laying down your will and submission and things like that. But I really felt like the Lord said today, that verse, it's actually from First Timothy 6, verse 6. It says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. Now, like the context is speaking about money. It goes on to talk about money, but just as a standalone verse, it's a really good verse because this is the deal. It's not enough to just be godly, right? Or, in my case, to be in the right, or, as Christians, to be in the right, godliness with contentment. How often, I mean, we have the godliness, right? Like we go to church and we strive to be Christ-like, and we read our Bible every day, and we raise our children in, virtue as best we can. And, you know, we're living, in step with the Holy Spirit, hopefully trying to, but it says godliness with contentment is great gain. That means that we can have godliness without contentment. And for me, I think, I do struggle with that. I know that that is something I struggle with. Let me know down in the comments if you struggle with that as well. But, you know, I'm a believer. Every day we're in the Word. We go to church on Sunday. We live out our faith, things like this. But it's the contentment part that really gets me because it's like, how often are we, even as believers, looking to the next thing? Or when it comes to our marriage, we want, our husband to be a certain way. And I'm not saying they don't need to grow. I'm not saying that God just is happy with them where they are at. But I'm saying, like, this is who God has given me. This is my guy. And, you know, godliness with contentment is great gain. What about like where we live? I know that's something I really struggle with. It was really hard for me when we bought this house in town. We came from the country, and I grew up in the country, never saw myself living in town. And that was really like a part of my life where God was really working with the whole submission to my husband thing. And man, the things that God did through that. I mean, we got this house just in time, but it's like God was like, lay down your will. I know that this isn't, what you necessarily want, but lay your will down. Like, I've got a plan. And my goodness, God did have a plan. I can totally see it. We've been in this house for 6 years. Um, but yeah, contentment. Can I be content living in town? We have more property actually than we did at our last place. We have just about 3 acres here, and we lived on an acre in our last place, but it was in the country. Godliness with contentment. I really do think that our faith comes down to, the second thing I'm going to tell you here in a second, but contentment is really one of them. How many times, like, comparison, we're not, because we're not content, we're comparing. Like, this is my lot in life. And the second idea, it's not just a single word, it's an idea. The second thing that goes hand in hand with that is really the sovereignty of God. Because, oh, excuse me, I wanted to back up. I wanted to read a couple verses on contentment. So yes, godliness with contentment is great gain. And in context, that's talking more so about money. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, then we will be content. Um, Luke 12:15, and he said to them, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Like, how many times do we do that? We're like, we're looking to the next thing, or, Amazon, that's definitely a thing, especially that I've been convicted with, and then I know a lot of other homemakers, have deal with that. I mean, we can buy things, with the tap of a button, and it's kind of like a dopamine hit. You get a little hit from that. Like even just little things, like we get excited, that there's something coming in the mail, and I know where I'm at in my life right now. What, we have 6 kids, and we're open to more, but praying that this, may be it, and for me, we got married, and it's just having kids one after the other after the other, and you I had that, like there's constantly like a newness, and my oldest is now 11. My youngest, he's over a year old now, just about 18 months old. And it's like, I think we can fall prey to that. We want something new. We want something new. So then, a lot of times we can turn to shopping, or like, rearranging the house, or getting in shape, or, all of these things. And I'm not saying like all those things are innately bad, but it's like anything out of proper place, like we're supposed to avoid all extremes, but let me know in the comments, is this something that you kind of struggle with? Do you struggle with contentment? 2 Corinthians 12:10, for the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities, for when I am weak, then I am strong. So here's Paul talking about how he's content with his weaknesses, with insults and hardships and stuff. And it's like my lot in life, which is so much tied to the sovereignty of God. That's the second thing I want to talk about here. Can I be content with where I am right now? The things that God has placed in my life right now. Like I know for me, like I really want to make a difference in the world. And I just live in like this small town of 700 people. And it's like, God, why would you lead me out here to like the wilderness? That's what it feels like. There are people here. We're connected with the church and things. And my heart is so wicked. I'm just being honest. At my worst, it can be like that. It's like, God, why did you lead us out here? There's like nothing here. I can't, it feels like a wilderness sometimes. And being content with my lot in life. You know, like David, for example. I know I spoke about that book, and David perceived that he was king. I did order another one. It's called The Throne of David, also by this author, but I want to reread this one again because it is just so good. I just want to keep reading it. It's amazing. He was anointed king, but he didn't immediately become king. Like there was a lot of time that had went by, or even like he's in the wilderness tending his father's sheep, and being content in that place. And we have hindsight, which is 2020. We know the whole story, but he didn't know the whole story. Like killing the lion and the bear, that equipped him and gave him faith, to slay Goliath. But like his wilderness, that place was equipping him for what was to come. And it's like, but he was content with that. And I mean, we don't know, maybe there was a time when he wasn't content with that, and he worked through that. Let's see. 2 Corinthians 12:10. Oh, sorry, I just read that one. Isaiah 26:3, and keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. So the peace and the contentment, it comes when our minds are steadfast on him, on God, right? Um, which, I think that's a good place to go. The second place, the second thing that I think, our Christian faith really comes down to that, this morning when I woke up, it really, contentment is so intertwined with this, but the sovereignty of God, and the reason that is connected to contentment is because it's like, am I okay with God and where he has placed me? Do I truly believe that he is sovereign and in control? And all of our lives look different, right? Like, how many of us would love our life to be, more loud and exciting and this and that? But it's like, no, God put us here because he wants us here. There's things that we need to do in this place. Like, he wants us to glorify him in this place. If you have little kids, we're called to raise our little kids, raise them in the ways of the Lord. I mean, we don't want to wish that time away, but oftentimes we kind of act like we're wishing it away because it's like, oh, once I get done raising my kids, then God can use me for something great. But the sovereignty of God. And I have come to find that a lot of times, like, I am honestly, this is another one of my sins that I struggle with, something that God is really working on me with, but judging God, like judging him for where he's put me in my life. And can I be okay with this? Can I have contentment in the sovereignty of God? I am learning to, yes. I mean, I'm learning to lay down my will and to have that contentment, and I mean, yes, I do find peace when I just rest in that and just be like, you know, this is where God has put me. And this is the thing with that. God will let us get to the end of ourselves. He'll let us wrestle it out with him and duke it out and throw our tantrums, whatever we want. God will let us do that. If he wants to get us to the end of ourselves, like, I am God, you are man. The clay doesn't say to the potter, why did you make me this way? But a lot of times we do. We say, God, why did you put me here? Why did you make me this way? Da da da. Why did you give me, you know, um, this husband that, and I mean, we chose them oftentimes, right? But we can stand in judgment of what we don't know God is going to do in our husband's life, right? Like, can we be content with the fact that God is working on our husbands right now, that God is working in our midst? Like, he's not just going to snap his finger and make it work. Like, he could very well do that. But God, you know, he chose to step into our time, like Jesus. He sent Jesus. Jesus dwelt with us, and God still, he chooses to work inside our time frame. Like, things take time. Like, there's a principle of heaven, Galatians 6:7, like, a man reaps what he sows. Like, God has stepped into our time frame and has used our reality of, like, you reaping what you sow, and like all of this. And so like, my connection there is, you know can you trust me that I am sovereign, that your husband is in my hands, that I'm working on him? But seeds take time to grow, and they need to be watered, and they need sunlight. And can you be content and happy with where you are right now? I hope I was able to bless you today, but I really do feel like Christianity kind of comes down to those two things: contentment and the sovereignty of God. You know, um, God is God, and He has put us where He has put us. I did want to read a little, some Bible verses on the sovereignty of God. Um, Psalm 115:3. Our God is in the heavens; He does all that He pleases. Proverbs 19:21. Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. The Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. I mean, God is sovereign. Um, And are we okay with that? He is the potter, we are the clay. Our lives are to glorify and magnify him. And he's put us all in different places. Are we okay with that? Can we find contentment with the sovereignty of God? I know for me, I can stand in judgment of God so many times and just be like, well, God, you shouldn't do it this way, you should da-da-da, whatever. But God is sovereign, and he does let us make our choices very much play into, he doesn't nail us down and, make us do some of the things that we think he is, I mean, he's the Lord over everything, but he lets us make our own decisions, right? It doesn't mean he's less sovereign. I hope I was able to bless you today. We'll see you in the next video.